The piece came about because I work in the south side and live on the north side, and I always have, most of my life anyway. So I never seen a divide, the river as a divide in the city. To me it was something that united the city. I never did see the women on either sides of the river as being divided, as being a north and south. To me their cultures were the same, and that's what unites us and united the women in the project together.
I started off with ideas of stories that my mother had told me when I was a child about her own childhood and the poverty and the things that had happened to her, how she was orphaned when she was only about 8 years old and how she lost her 3 little brothers within a year and 8 months. She always had a sort of lonely, lost feeling about this. The stories all through are women's stories, and they all have great threads running through them.
When I was 13 and a half, I wanted a vanity case, and we didn't have money to get this vanity case. So I went across to the factory that was across the road from the flats where I lived, and I got a job, but I didn't realise that that job was going to be for life. I left school and I continued to work in the factory, and I never got the vanity case.
Unspoken Truths is an exhibition of work made by 32 Dublin women, many of whom had a little previous involvement with the visual arts. They come from 2 community development projects, the Lourdes Youth and Community Services in the North Inner City and the Family Resource Centre St Michael's Estate in the South City. The work is the result of 18 months considered thought and planning, bringing together artist Ailbhe Murphy, the 32 women, their community development projects, and the Education Department of the Irish Museum of Modern Art.
I lived in Sean McDermott Street since I was a year old when I moved there, and I moved out when I was 12. But while we were living there, we were in a 2-room flat, and there was 9 children, and my mother and my father had died. So it was kind of like sort of hectic, and there wasn't a lot of money there at the time. So to me, the rag and bone man, that was their only way of getting some sort of tie. Like if you brought out old clothes, he'd give you maybe a balloon or some sort of little tie. Some of the mothers actually used to have to go out and be taking half the stuff back.
I entered the convent in 1951 and went away to a missionary country. So my piece is about leaving home, about becoming the bride of Christ, and then what I hoped would be, you know, a lifelong vocation for me. I had to abandon the religious life. I had to leave it because I found the system oppressive. And in 1982, I had a dream, and I dreamt that I was dragging a sack up a concrete slope, and the sack was on a trolley. But the sack was stuffed to capacity. And shortly after that, I went into a psychiatric hospital for 2 years, and I discovered the sack was really me. And to carry myself around, it was taking me all my energies with all the feelings I had bottled over the years. We used to wear this coif, and I've left it in the psychiatric hospital. It was very painful coming to terms with having to leave. But when I was in the hospital, my community wrote and said, we've made a decision no longer to fund any further inpatient stays for you. They decided to pay no more fees for me. Now, I felt that rejection. I felt it very, very badly. And yet I wasn't discharged, and I wasn't ready to go back. And I thought if I went back to the convent in that state, I'd only be asking for trouble. I'd only go back down the road I just struggled 2 years to try and pull myself out of. In order to save my sanity, really, I left.
Well, I called it Crossroads because it's about life beginning at 40. I started off with the wedding, and Joe had a suit when we got married. I had a short dress. No money for a red carpet. But when I made this piece, and then we heard we were coming to the Museum of Modern Art, Joe got a dress suit, and I got a long wedding dress, and we rolled out the red carpet.
It's basically my story from the ages of 12 until about 19. Both my parents died when I was very, very young, and I just couldn't take it. And there was no one I could talk to because I felt nobody could understand. How could they when I didn't understand myself what was happening? So one morning I got up and I just saw a bottle of tablets and I swallowed the whole bottle of tablets. And somebody found me, I don't know, and I was taken into hospital where you could come and go when you liked, and they were pumping you full of this pill and that pill and this pill and antidepressants, and there was pills to get you up in the morning and pills to get you through the day and other pills to send you back to sleep. But after 3 years anyway, they said I was cured. And I came out of the whole system of a psychiatric hospital, but I was still the half a whole person that I went in. As one doctor said, enter human, exit zombie. I think Dr. Walsh said that. That's exactly how I felt. But I was fighting back at this system. I didn't like what was happening. The doctors say there's a pill for every ill. Well, most of the time it's not a pill that's needed, it's just a neo. And going back to this half a whole person, I don't regret it 1 minute, because it's the person that's in the box that made the person who came out of the box.
The idea came up, I'd write about my father being away in the First World War, and he was 2 years away before he got a leave of absence. And then he wrote to my mother and said that he was getting a weekend leave and she was to have everything ready. So he arrived home on a Christmas Eve and married her on a Stevens's Day. And he went off back again to the war, and my mother discovered she was pregnant. He didn't get back home for 4 years, he didn't see that child till 4 years, so it was a love story that I wasn't aware of until I actually researched it.
I used to sew coats and travel the world in my head. I was always somewhere, and I was, you know, I'd say it'd be South America one day, it'd be Africa, Belfast, all over the place. And then one day the bosses decided to turn all the machines to the wall, and that's why my piece has the machine face to the wall. And it was all women who was being turned to the wall, and it was a very, very dehumanising thing to do. And we brought the union in, and he was a man, and he said to us, you know, when we said, look, this isn't on, like, we can't work this way. And he said to us, well, could you give me a psychological reason why that wall affects you? And at that stage, that's the day that I broke through those bars. So my piece has many dimensions in it, but the main dimension that I really want to come out is the whole issue of class and the patterns that set out for you because you come from a specific class.
My life story, things that happened in my life, my mother's life, and what's repeating itself again down to my sons. I mean, there are basically a lot of people's lives that's there, not just my own. You know, like other people would respond to that as well. So I thought by doing it myself, it'd probably bring others out.
And I started recalling stories that my mother had told me about her childhood. And she was born in 1892, and she was orphaned when she was about 8 years old. And it was a very tragic and time of loss for her, and I think she carried that over into her life, and it would have had an effect on me as a child growing up. Though I was the youngest of 14, I was brought up as an only child also. I developed it as a story, calling it Sissy, and sort of projected myself into her as a child. And I think in a sense I was telling my own story too. I was delighted when I found that old photo because it was really her in her youth. It was her as I'd never known her, like, you know. I'd only known her as a middle-aged and old woman. I never saw the young woman with the real fire and the spirit or the love story between her and my father.
The piece for me was taking me back to my childhood when I used to go to a convent school in Gardiner Street, and I passed through Mountjoy Square every day, and it was quite an elegant square. I was particularly struck in childhood by this window that I used to see going to school. It was a blue velvet window, and it was very elegant, and that is in my mind. I started on this project with a poem about the destruction of Mountjoy Square. Over the years, 2 sections have deteriorated, and I'm just appalled that for 30 years nothing has been done to address this situation.
I'm a single parent with an 8-year-old daughter, and I used to go and visit the father's parents, which are my daughter's grandparents. And one day I went out and I was saying I was going to get a flat on Michael's estate, and the mother was absolutely horrified that I was living in such a place. The family live out in Ballsbridge in a very big house and they're very wealthy. So when we were leaving that day, she gave me this box, and the first thing we opened was the meatballs, which some had gone out of it. But earlier that day, the mother had told me that Daddy didn't like the meatballs, so this must have been why I was getting the few that was left in the tin. So we kind of passed that over, just laughing about it, and we were digging deeper into the box, and I opened a jar, came across a jam jar, which had been opened. So we just presumed Daddy didn't like that either. And she gave me cushion covers that must have been passed down through generations. They're absolutely in tatters. And there was a single sheet that she told me that one of the children had ripped when they were small. And there was two ways of looking at it. I felt that it was the opinion of what the wealthy feel that the less wealthy need, and that they should be grateful for what they're given. But maybe she thought it was the best she could do.
Well, this piece is really representing, in one sense, the menstrual cycle and the effect it has on a woman's life and the significance of it in a woman's life. For the person that's watching and watching for it, if they don't get it, like, it's a bit of a disaster. And then for the one that doesn't want it, you know, it's the opposite really. The woman is really the two-sided woman, and the media or society image of the woman. And basically I feel that all women have the same feelings or the same expectations themselves, and that really gives a woman to dress any way she likes or be any way she likes.
Everybody's mother had a mantle at the time. The whole idea is really based on when we were young and remembering all these people. The jar of sweets there represents this woman that we used to go for their sweets because you weren't allowed Crossroads. She used to sell all the sweets in the window. And this bottle of Guinness here is the last woman that lived in Foley Street. And she wouldn't get out of Foley Street until they gave her a flat in Liberty House. So they knocked Foley Street down both sides of where she was living, and her house, like it was like a tenement, and her house was the only house that was standing. So we asked her family what could we represent, and he said a bottle of stout because she loved one.
The work in Unspoken Truths developed over 18 months with regular workshops by full-time artists, poets and writers, which alternated between both community projects and the museum. The Irish Museum of Modern Art's policy of access and engagement and its potential as a resource was recognised by both community projects who believe in the value of the visual arts.
Well, the aim of the project was to bring the women together to explore their own experience and to express it through visual means and also through written word. The groups met in their centres once a week but came together as a larger group once a month, and those meetings happened predominantly here in the museum. And at those meetings there were a lot of inputs from other artists, writers and poets, which allowed the work to evolve and the ideas to grow.
If we take this, the full circle through what we started, through the participating of women, through the challenging of the arts, through coming into an institution, to evaluating, well then I think also that we have a duty, because it has been a success, to place challenges to those who make the decisions about who resources.
I mean, I really believe that people can produce work of excellence, but it is around resources being available, and in that I mean resources of money and people.
Unspoken Truths challenges the assumption that community-based arts projects are of a lower standard and presents a model for more active engagement between art institutions and the community in general.
I always just seen artists as canvas and people painting, which I never felt I could have done, you know. I think as well that you look at art differently after something like this. Like, before I would have looked at some art and just said, oh, I can't understand that, it's abstract. Now I'd actually try and understand it.
The art can be as simple as just doing someone's hair, that you can go from there. You can use cloth, you can use plaits, you can use anything.
Art was something very beautiful but very cold on a wall. It didn't stir me. But certainly it provoked me.
I mean, before I wouldn't have even dreamed of going into an art museum, but I would now, and I think it's a great way for people to be able to express themselves. Maybe they haven't got the right words to express it, but by doing a piece of work, you're expressing yourself.
Art was something that was maybe hung in art galleries by these professional people that I didn't know. They weren't part of my life. But I mean, having worked on the piece and looking at all the other women's piece, they say so much. They speak to me, they speak my language.